welcome to our latest episode of our Oncology Data Advisor podcast on AI and technology. I'm Waqas. I'm a fellow at U Chicago in medical oncology. I'm joined by one of our guests today, Ian Maurer, who's the Chief Technology Officer of GenomOncology, which is a precision oncology company that's been around since 2012. Thanks so much for joining today, Ian.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah. So we just want to get things kicked off with a sort of simple question. Tell us a little bit about what Genome Oncology is and kind of about your precision oncology platform and kind of how you're working to use that to transform the clinical trial landscape.
Great. Yeah, so GenomOncology started in pathology. So we actually have what we call our molecular pathology workbench, which is basically taking data off of a sequencer, right? Illumina, Thermo Fisher, and generating a report, white labeled report for that actual pathology lab. We're generating thousands of reports per month for these various labs. And to actually make that report, we needed something interesting to say. So over the years, we've built what we call our precision oncology platform, which is effectively a knowledge graph, which means it's basically the knowledge of oncology, specifically precision oncology, codified in nodes and edges, right? Circles and lines between them.
Right. Awesome. And within the context of oncology, of course, as we know, there's a really big gap in matching patients to clinical trials. Only 2 to 3% of trials ever get filled up with complete participation, and there's a lot of barriers in clinical trials in oncology, from access to clinical trials to patient understanding to matching patients with the right biomarkers. So I know with Genome Oncology, your platform boasts automatic matching of patients to trials from a database of over 14,000 curated trials. Tell us a little bit about how that process works, especially when it comes to things like molecular or clinical eligibility.
Yeah, so biomarkers are great because it actually allows us to target therapies for a specific patient. The unfortunate side effect of that is the complexity it adds to the situation. So each trial has multiple arms. Each arm can have their own what are called eligibility criteria. So inclusion and exclusion criteria, and that can include things like prior treatments and age, gender, the health of the patient, but also these molecular biomarkers, which can include, basically combinations of biomarkers that need to be there or not be there. So what we've done is, over the last 10 years, really reading all of the clinical trials, codifying them into this knowledge graph, and that allows us to do this automatic kind of what's called symbolic AI, old school AI, good old fashioned AI, to do reasoning over it, to generate recommended matches. And so it effectively is like a search and matching algorithm that can do it at scale. Obviously the challenge is the biomarkers are only one part of it. We also have the ontology around diseases themselves. Actually understanding what disease the patient has is a complex question because there's, it's actually a graph of diseases. Our system knows that. We've codified all of that. And so what our system can do is do that first pass, which is that algorithmic matching, really cutting down the number of false positives that are out there and provide clinical trial navigators and nurses, high quality candidates to then use, humans to actually make the final screening decisions. And then, with large language models, obviously the last couple of years, adding those into the mix has been part of our effort as well to further cut down on those false positives, to make sure that we're, looking at some of the conditions and other criteria that honestly we haven't had time to curate by hand. Can a large language model come in and then do another pass at that to basically cut out some more of the false positives and do the work that we haven't done with prior interventions and biomarkers and diseases and other things like that in our curation.
Right, got it. And yeah, I think just from my experience at looking at how patients get matched to clinical trials in the cancer setting, of course, there's a technical aspect of looking like things like prior treatment lines, looking at things like what their diagnosis is, looking at things like lab markers, biomarkers, and obviously you have the artistic aspect of things as well. Like when you see a patient in clinic, do they have good performance status? Do they look like they have the right caregiver support, the right social support to be a right clinical trial fit? So I think sort of cutting down on that first pass time is really important because it kind of gives providers that time to focus more on the artistic side and kind of figuring out if someone's the right fit for the trial, and then having to spend less time at sort of reviewing some of the technical information and sort of going through lists of patients and manually checking.
Exactly right.
So yeah, definitely very important to work on those things. And I saw that Genome Oncology had a collaboration with the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, and where that led to sort of increase in biomarker driven trial matching by over 300%. I was just curious with that example, and maybe other companies you've worked with, what kind of challenges do people have before implementing your platform, and then how do you kind of work with them to solve those problems?
Sure. So when we went to market with the biomarker-based matching 6 or 7 years ago, we were sort of naive and realized, oh, we can make these great matches.
Mhm.
But then you realize that you start peeling back the onion and you realize there's other problems. First thing was geospatial, right? You want to make sure you're recommending trials that are actually in the area. Then the next level is we realize that cancer institutions sometimes don't want to recommend trials that are outside their institution. So we've been integrated with Encore and some of these other CTMSs to make sure we're getting only that institution specific trials, make sure that they're actually recruiting at the arm level, right? So sometimes there's a trial and only one particular arm is available. So making sure that that arm's there. And so for the Pancreatic Cancer Society, they were doing things brute force with, manual searching and things like that. And you can get a lot of false positives with, searching by gene name only. And then another thing that we see is, we have a vendor agnostic data ingestion system, meaning, so we're generating pathology reports, thousands a month, but we also have clients that are using other labs, right? They might not use their internal lab. They might have a Tempus or a Foundation or a Caris or a Guardant. Those labs have structured data formats that we're able to parse, right? Whether it's XML or JSON. So we can ingest those feeds as well for them and use that for matching. And then lastly, if all they have is a PDF, we actually have, OCR and with NLP, so optical character recognition and natural language processing to do unstructured data to structured data. Because getting that patient, unfortunately, like 80% of patient data is unstructured. Getting it structured really is a limiting factor in this matching capability.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when like new patients come for a second opinion or come to an academic center and they have 100, 200
Exactly.
pages of documents from their old place, and you have to kind of decipher that. So yeah, definitely very important to have the kind of character recognition and being able to structure the data. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is that, sort of since last year, we've seen the advent of trials GPT. We're seeing a lot of different LLMs that are being used to support trials matching. So I think naturally we're just going to see a lot more companies in this space. So what kind of capabilities, what kind of differentiating factors do you think will help companies lead in this space? And yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, obviously the large language models themselves, are getting smarter every day. We use them, whether it's the latest and greatest one or fine-tuned for, medical information. Both are great depending on the use case. Our system is deployed behind the firewall, integrated with their data, right? Whether it's in the EHR, clinical data warehouse, with their CTMS. So a lot of this is just kind of the heavy lifting of data integration, right? It's cool to take a list of 100 patients and a list of 1,000 trials and say, yeah, let's go do the 100,000 combinations of those and ask a large language model what the best cases are. Not the most cost-effective way of doing it. The way our system works is it actually can take that number down greatly and then use the large language models to just kind of do the rough, kind of clean things up if necessary. And then the other thing, what you really want is a system like ours where we keep track of the recommendations and how far they go in the process of it towards enrollment. Because what you can then do is train on those actual decisions by humans, right? So the humans in the loop actually have even more signal than the large language models themselves, because that actually tells you what true success was, not just what, the large language model thinks, quote unquote, right? It's a black box. We really don't know, how it's making this decision. So it's really an ensemble approach, right? You want to have data integrated. You want to have process to speed things up because people want to do the easiest possible thing. And then you want to have a cheap search and match capability, cheap meaning like using a CPU, not some complicated GPU or sending your data to a third-party cloud provider with who knows what they're actually doing with the data, right? We want it all on-prem, and then we want those decisions to be made and tracked. And then really the goal is to speed up and augment and amplify the people that are actually trying to do their work, not just make a list of potential trial matches, right? Like you see these papers and it's great. Yeah, they can get 80% accurate or 90% accurate. Honestly, the hard work is not just making a list. The hard work is actually doing all the other plumbing and stuff that to actually integrate that matching capability. And we take very great pride in like making sure that we're no false negatives. We don't want to miss any opportunities, but we got to really reduce the number of false positives so that the person that's actually trying to do the work doesn't have to wade through bad matching after bad matching, and they really can just focus their time on the artistic part of the job.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That kind of segues into my next question, just talking a little bit about access to clinical trials. Of course, it's a lot more than just, putting patients into a list. You have to address the barriers to clinical trials, whether it be just patient
Right.
understanding, having the right incentives for the oncologist or physician to discuss clinical trials. having the right geographic setup, having the right kind of setup if you want to do a decentralized trial. You can go on and on about different barriers that might actually happen, even if you have the match on a technical side. How is genome oncology sort of helping to work address some of the access issues for trials?
Yeah, so we have a partner at Meditech. So Meditech is one of the EHR providers who are not just talking about doing this stuff and like projecting, the release of some of these capabilities. They actually have our software and data systems directly embedded in the EHR, and we deployed that to Frederick Health about 6 months ago and had great uptake on trials and also recommendations of therapies. And what that shows is really just having it in the workflow, having it as simple as possible for the provider so that they're not having to do extra work, like work to go find options for their patient. That really is the number one thing that's going to, open up access. Obviously, the biomarkers are the key thing, because the biomarker says, hey, this is the person is, their tumor at least is genetically tailored for this specific drug, or at least what they're proposing with this drug. Let's go ahead and identify them and work them through the system. And if we can just reduce some of the technological burden and some of the time and effort required, I think it's going to greatly lift. And we've already seen the results at Frederick with the number of trials that they were able to add. I don't know if it was 8 times as many folks, but something roughly like that. It's been a great initial thing, and that was just 6 months. And they're not even really, Meditech's not fully integrated with all of our capabilities yet. So we're really excited to get even more and more of our software and data into their system. And then we're also working towards doing the same things with Cerner and Epic, who honestly aren't necessarily as forwarded and wanting to integrate with third parties like ourselves. They kind of want to do stuff themselves and announce that they're doing things. And we're actually moving forward right now.
Right. Yeah. No, I saw the recent news article about Frederick Health, and really cool to see the patients who are being referred for trials, and some of the more easier information for physicians as well. I can say that in the geo clinics I go to, a lot of that, for cervical, endometrial, ovarian cancer, we don't have like that many good options beyond just standard chemotherapy. So a lot of patients end up being on clinical trials, and even the attendings or PIs, they have to search through these big like sheets of papers to figure out criteria, figuring out which arms of the trial there are, figuring out the schedule, and there's so many different trials opening and closing all the time. So
Right.
it's hard to know like
And
which
when
one's
you're
open. Right.
Yeah, and one of the things, as large language models get more adopted and are more easily deployed in
Yeah.
a secure HIPAA compliant way, you'll be able to chat with those trials, right? So you'll be able to use Genome Oncology to bring back the list of 5 trials and then ask it, hey, what are of these 5 trials, what's the best candidate and why? And then have it actually give you excerpts from the actual trial itself. Now, so you're not just getting a black box answer. That, I feel like, is going to be the way things are going to move forward, which is human in the loop, tools like Genome Oncology doing the best to like do the filtering, where you can actually see it in a white box way, where we can actually tell you, here's why we're showing you the ones we're showing you, right? It said EGFR exon 19 deletion. You have this specific mutation that's in the 19th exon of EGFR. Great. This is a match for you, and that's why. But now if there's like, another 10 paragraphs to read for 5 trials and you're busy, like maybe the LLM can help you figure out what of those 5 trials, which one's best for your patient.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely, totally agreed. And just kind of last question, just kind of as you think about sort of evolving landscape of precision oncology clinical trials, what developments are you most excited about?
Well, I mean, I am really excited about large language models. I mean, just in general, and obviously multimodality. They've been talking about imaging and other things. I really do think we're going to be in a renaissance of whether it's generative AI or other types of self-supervised models, right? Where models can get better either through reinforcement learning or some of these other advanced techniques. I think it's going to just unlock a ton of things, right? In every other aspect of our lives, I'm worried about where AI is going to help or hurt us, right? In healthcare, I feel like it's nothing but help, right? Because we're just trying to just swim. We're swimming in data. We're trying to do the best for these patients, and we're burdened by too much work. I really think that these tools are going to really just unlock a bunch of capabilities. And then there's also new biomarkers all the time that mean something, and new drugs that are being discovered. That's going to make our knowledge base bigger and bigger and more complex, and it's going to make honestly the providers' jobs harder. And hopefully they'll need someone like Genome Oncology to help kind of just keep everything at their fingertips, so that they don't have to basically read every single PubMed article that comes out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Thanks so much for your time, Ian. Really appreciate it. And yeah, all the best with Genome Oncology.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.